All right, so there's cool stuff going on in Manchester Airport right now. There's a lot of UAP activity, um, so many photos, so many reports coming out, a lot of videos, and traffic diversion is going on. So something's happening there. And we got a photo from one of the pilots there from his cockpit that managed to zoom in, take a photo, also a video, um, where it's just floating up in the sky, doesn't shoot up or anything. But that person is now deleted off of Twitter. I think they either got removed or they deleted themselves, or we don't really know. But basically, all we have are these photos and the continuing reports that are occurring in the area. But basically, what I wanted to do is see if this higher than average quality photo that we have received in terms of UAPs is any more information can be abstracted out of this in terms of what is this thing. And I just wanted to do sort of an artist rendition of potentially what I'm seeing here. But I'm only human. I'm subject to faults, but I feel like I'm seeing stuff still in this image that is hard to look past. Um, and I feel like what we're seeing here is not just a regular ball, but a ball with spikes, where there's these dark lines here that indicate a change in form that isn't sort of justifiable by refraction of light unless they got alien material. Of course they do, but that fucks with light in a way that it's like getting these things on here. I don't know. But it doesn't make sense in terms of regular material that we understand. So I think this is a change in form. Um, because there's a slight change in silhouette here potentially as well, which could be artifacting, but nothing else in the image really artifacts to the point that it sticks out like the way that this does. Now, that could be because it's gray sky and it's on this reflectivity onto a material that is on a gray tarmac, which when you take a photo of it, it sort of like scrambles the top of it because it's too close in value. But still, at the very least, we've got these lines here that can't be explained. Um, Nothing else in the image has lines that are defined enough that aren't actually changing the form of the structure. Um, so these are changing within the form of the object. So it's not your regular silver spherical UAP. It seems like a bluish, spiky-ish version of it. Um, and it's not Sonic. This is an AI upscale, which I didn't use because I think it makes it a bit too. It just doesn't it loses the quality of it, and I think it's just better to stick with what we have here. So all of the influence in terms of what I created here was only abstracted out of the raw photos that were provided. Now, I don't know on top of this, before I jump into the deep end on how I ended up with this form, that I don't know if the camera that he used to take this photo, if it has inbuilt AI upscaling software into it. But even still, I still think that at the very least, it's a spiky ball of sorts. Okay, with all that sort of context out of the way, I just want to talk about light and forms and what's happening here. So first up, there's this thing going on here. There's a dark rim here and then sort of like a light bit in here. And it doesn't make sense in terms of refraction, where everything's like this doesn't make sense in terms of why it's sort of a dark rim here. Um, and then a lighter colored rim here. Um, So I think it's a change in form as well. So if I was just to highlight these lines here, at the very least, these are change in forms. So once again, at the very least, it's this, just to sort of get to this point at least. And I want to walk you through my sort of artist rendition of this sort of thing, because if at the very least it's this, then I kind of went through this process of figuring out how does those lines even make sense in terms of a three-dimensional structure. Um, and I saw other supporting lines that it felt like there were connected pieces amongst it. So one of the big ones here, um, so this image here, just so you can know what the difference is. So original image over here, and this is adjusted light values. So light is lighter, darks are darker, and it just makes everything have a lot more contrast, so I can identify forms and shadow and light. Um, and if these are spiky sort of things, there's a sort of like another sort of shape going on in here, this sort of curved line that follows through, right? And then lay it on top of that. I feel like there's another line going through here, because it does seem like another form of shadow here. And you'll see throughout the image as well that um, shadow points are consistent throughout the image. So, and like slight bends and gradient changes, like, so I was sort of playing upon what I'm seeing in the rest of the image. Like, you can't see the straight sort of seam that would probably be right here unless it sort of flows into here. I don't exactly know an airplane structure, but um, it seemed like a harder sort of line following through here. Anyway, so how did I end with this thing here? Um, I also noticed this section where there was a line that was connecting up here onto the sort of peak of this circle bit. So there's a dark circle line here, and then it feels like it's like this shape. And then it feels like it's like this shape. And then this one sort of curves geometry-wise as well, as previously stated. And then there's another shadow back here, which I felt like was the underside shadow of something, like an under edge, yeah, under edge shadow, basically. And it doesn't look entirely spherical. Like, we can debate, of course, but it feels slightly, just slightly off from a sphere. Um, and I don't know if perspective shifts would really do that. Maybe edge bleeding and whatever artifacting could elongate it. But if I was to get a sphere, just dot right there, there still does seem a little bit of wiggle room. And it could also start, if I align it a lot more down here, there's a little bit of wiggle room, it seems, on the top as well, potentially. Um, just by a tiny bit, that it just feels a bit longer than it is wider. And that could just be me. But that's my gut feeling. Um, and if that's the case, then I feel like it's a sphere, but you're building sort of elements on top of it that a lot of these lines that follow through feel like they could actually follow through, and highlights follow away where they sort of stop as well. Like, this highlight here sort of stops on here. And so there's enough sort of form that I feel like I can identify that I ended up with this shape. And going into the actual scene here that I've created for this thing, um, so I can actually select all of these objects that are created here. And this thing can spin around on this sphere. I mean, we've seen these sphere objects moving around, and it wouldn't be surprising if a stationary object, oh, not really stationary, a moving object can have another moving object. Oh, well, duh. But but it, I basically, this feels like it could actually function when it gets down to it. So like these lines or these things feel like they're gripping around it to the point where it almost feels like a ball joint. Um, and like just the way that like if I put in the same perspective as it is here, we jump back to here. This does feel like it's wrapping around on this side. So it these lines don't make sense if they're not wrapping around. Um, and I do not know what this thing is here. Of course, the human imagination will call this an eye, and yes, it might be some Yu-Gi-Oh-esque looking fucking eye in the sky or whatever. But yeah, I have no idea what the hell this thing is. It could be a laser. It could just be analyzing stuff. It could be who fucking knows? It's basically it's an opening to something for a reason. And that's all we can kind of take out of it. Whether or not there's truly an opening there is up for debate, but it feels like there's an opening there. Um, some other properties that I just wanted to analyze about this image is that other people pointed this out, but there seems to be the shadow, but there's also like a glow here, and we know that these objects glow, but um, oh, so oh, let's get rid of that mini. It is big, but um, this thing feels like there's a slight glow here that doesn't sort of get replicated anywhere else within the image. Um, so yeah, just something interesting I saw throughout that as well. I think that's it really. Like I'm really stumped by this thing. It's a cool object. It looks like a not a regular sphere, but a multi-layered sphere that may have elements that can spin around it, which could rule out AI, because AI doesn't know mechanics and doesn't know to wrap around shit, and but it doesn't rule out CGI. I have no idea whether it's CGI. But anyway, those are my 2 cents. Hopefully, it's a bit helpful. Let me know what you guys think.